Now for a weather update. Head for the beach. Today will be sunny with light trade winds. Our highs will be in the mid-80s. And surfers, listen up. Surf on the east shores will remain at heights of 2 to 4 feet. And there's a high surf warning for the north shore with swells of 15 to 20 feet expected.
Out in paradise.
And when I was initially asked to do this, first I thought, oh yeah, this would be fun, you know. And then immediately after that feeling, I was really afraid to do the video because I felt like, well, that's just really taking another step to coming out more and exposing yourself for who you are.
One of the reasons why I chose to do this video is because I want to give a face to being a lesbian. When these people that want to go out and gay bash or do whatever they want, I want them to think twice before they do that, because it could be their sister, it could be their mother, it could be their brother, it could be their uncle, and don't do that. It's not AIDS, it's not about AIDS, it's not about, it's about life, it's about choices, and sometimes it's not about choices. Because I was born this way. I didn't choose. I chose to follow my heart. That was where my choice was.
I was born gay, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I like to play with my brother's G.I. Joe. I mean, I don't know if that meant anything. But I also fantasized about being a young boy, I guess. Or a man, or who like swept, you know, who did exciting things like he was a spy or something, and doing like all these adventurous things, or, you know, sweeping women off their feet, or I don't know. I mean, yeah, I didn't have any like dolls, or, you know, play with Barbie dolls and stuff like that. So
I had a crush on Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music, and that must have been when I was 5. And when I think back, I remember having crushes on Chinese actresses before that. I was born in Hong Kong. So that must be from the time I was 3 or 4. So I was conscious, but not really aware of the implications. I became aware that it was unusual for me to feel these things around 6th grade, around the time I was 11 years old, when they were calling each other these names, that I thought, well, but that's how I felt, so I better not say anything.
What names?
They were in Chinese. Now I don't recall. I must have blocked it out. Things like homo, I'm sure, equivalent of homos. But it was earth-shattering that I thought, oh my God, wait a minute, they're talking about me. I better hide and not think about this anymore. And it was then, I think, that I decided that it was probably not good to express this to anyone else. And I remember going through years of, maybe about 5 or 6 years of every year during the New Year's resolution that I would not be this way.
I mean, I was a tomboy, you know. I rode horses and did rodeos, and and did all the sports stuff. And I know that at school I enjoyed the company of my classmates who were girls. And as I got older, I of course had a crush on my gym teacher and a couple of other teachers who were women. And it was real clear to me that when I watched my friends, a couple of my girlfriends, you know, gaga, goo, and makeup and all the stuff about boy stuff, it was like, it just wasn't there for me. I mean, I couldn't even, I really had to work at pretending about it.
As far as I can remember, I was always as tomboy as could be, and playing football, and you know, always with the guys hanging out and stuff. And no one really said, you know, anything to me like, oh, something's wrong with you or whatever. I just lived my life. And then when I got into high school, my friend, I guess she felt intimidated because I was so butch, you know, and I was rough, and she was a lesbian too, so, and we became best friends. And she used to hit on all the girls and smooch with the girls, and I was like, wow, gotta get me one. So I ended up falling in love with her sister, so that was my first experience, and from there I was hooked, you know. But I always had crushes on classmates, you know, in my younger days.
Grown-ups don't mind because they think you'll outgrow it, and you do. You get trained right out of it. I had an experience with a girlfriend that, which was my first erotic experience, and then a similar feeling with a boy, and I said, that's the real thing. You know, I'd been that acculturated. But it was all the real thing.
Well, it's like mahu is usually the term used with men that are very effeminate and sort of, in a Hawaiian sense, very cute. You know, it wasn't such a discrimination in my memory. But I do remember the first time I saw a dyke, you know, and I said to my mom, wow, what's that? She goes, that's a queer. You know, it was very definitely, that was not approved of.
It took me a long time before I could use the word dyke, because I always had, you know, dyke to me is was a real heavy-duty diesel dyke with you know, leathers, and you know, once again, you know, this comes from my background of the '60s, when there was that total separation between the butch and the femme, and the dykes wore the leathers and they combed their hair back in DAs, and you know, they looked like the greasers.
In Waianae, you either had to be a butchie or a femme, you know? It's like, you gotta be something. You just can't be Rainette, you know? I don't know, it was this whole scenario out in the late '60s where you had to be something. You had to have a label. And I have 5 brothers, so I'm rugged to begin with. So it was easy enough for me to just go into this rugged butchie mode. You know, I was not the femme type down there, shave the legs, short skirts, running around all foo-foo. And for some reason I find in Hawaii, it's a lot different, because when I went to Los Angeles, it really opened my eye, because then it became real clear that I didn't have to plug myself into a role. You know, that the gay men and the lesbians were just being ordinary people, that they didn't like turn into mahus. You didn't have a whole lot of mahus in Los Angeles. That's like a real local Hawaii type of thing.
I see myself as femme, and I'm attracted to people I see as butch. But it doesn't mean things like, well, that person has to earn the money and I'm going to stay home and things like that.
Yeah, it's not a role thing at all.
But it has a lot to do with attraction, I think. I wouldn't be attracted to somebody who looked just like me. I'm attracted to people who look like you.
All I know is that the moment I saw her, that I was attracted to her, and I couldn't even tell at the time whether she was a woman or a man. It was from a distance, but I could tell by her energy and her whole presence that was very attractive to me, whatever that was. And so, I don't know, what do you call that? Am I dyke? Am I a lesbian? Am I bisexual? Am I what? You know, and so for the most part, I label myself when it's appropriate, but it's not important to me.
So Cheryl, what's it like the first time you kissed a woman?
That's what it was like. It was great. It was great. She was so soft. It was amazing, the experience of that. It's like, wow, that's something. I like that.
I was blissed out. I mean, It was just so, it was like what I was waiting for, you know. I mean, it just felt right, just, you know, all the body parts fit and stuff. I mean,
I think it feels more natural for me to be with a woman, and I've never understood why. I really have asked myself this, you know, because there are men who I have loved, you know, and who I've been attracted to, but it's something, it's sort of like it didn't fit right or something, like ultimately it wasn't quite right. And then I realized, and I used to really wonder, like, what am I, what does this mean? Or if I had a feeling for a man, I thought then I couldn't be a lesbian, and I'd go through total confusion. And I actually, in New York, I was, at 2 different times I was in these rap groups, bisexual rap groups, like trying to find out my identity with everyone else in the group. And one group we were all women, and by the end of the group we all decided we were lesbians, and we were so happy. You know?
The first time I kissed a woman, it was incredible. My heart stopped. I don't know. It was, there was nothing like it. I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Just your whole body come hot, you know. First kiss, you know, the sensation of wanting more. I loved it. I didn't want to leave.
So I went out to the smoke box after I walked to the train station, kissed her, and I'm like, sitting there smoking my cigarette. I can't believe it. Coochie, what have you done? I can't, and it felt great. That's the, you know, I was like, and it felt great. So I thought about it for the longest time, and the more I thought about it, I said, so what? You know?
When I first tried to touch her, I was really afraid she would push me away. And I was delighted. The further I went, the less she pushed me away. No, that I think so, no. We were so young. I can't remember that far back.
It made my head spin, to tell you the truth. It happened so quick. Really, and it's so intense. It's just unbelievable.
When I kissed that woman in the 8th grade, that's all it took, the first kiss. That was when I first fell in love. And that was so heartbreaking. I mean, it was so intense. And it stayed with me for probably several years. The feelings that I had toward her did.
She wanted to know why I was crying, and I said, because it feels like you've raised me from the dead. I'd never felt anything before. It'd always been very mechanical, very, first you do this, and then you do that, and then you do this, and he comes, and then you go to sleep. That was it. I had never felt anything before, except maybe it's over. And this just kind of lingered. It went on for an hour, and then it had to be tried again, and tried again, and again, and again, and again.
I think that I've always been a lesbian, but there was no context for it when I was growing up. I had feelings for my girlfriends in high school that I knew were not okay to express, and as a matter of fact, I didn't even express them to myself. I had the feelings, but I didn't have a language or any role models or context to explore those feelings. So I tried real hard to be a good girl, a good straight girl, and spent quite a few years really numbing out my own feelings, and not just about my sexuality, but about a lot of things as a result of that. So that when I was 30 years old, I was married, I had a child, and I fell in love with a woman. And it came as a big surprise to me, and it was a wonderful surprise. It was as though all the little jigsaw puzzle pieces of my life sort of came together, and I understood who I was.
During the course of this co-counseling program, I made an offhand remark to her at one point about that I was more attracted to her than I was to a particular man we were discussing. And I just said it off the top of my head, and it didn't mean a thing to me, but it sure meant something to her. And she started prodding me with questions about this, and she said, well, people don't say things like that unless there's a grain of truth in it. And I said, blah, 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 blah. And one thing led to another, and about an hour later, I had to admit that I was attracted to her, whereupon she kissed me, and That's all she wrote. I have been a lesbian ever since.
And that wasn't me.
No, that wasn't Jacki. That was somebody else.
Thank goodness for recruiting. And that was about what it was. It's the old coming out story. And someone came to my house in a social situation, and she put her arms around me, and I wondered what in the world's going on. And she said, "What's the matter? Don't you like to hug?" And I said, "Oh yes." And I gave her a hug and let go, and she didn't let go. I still didn't know what was going on, and she kissed me, and I said, "Oh," to myself, what, wow, this feels good. Let's do some more of this. And I was a very willing convert. And I don't believe I was a convert. I think I was just one of those people that was a little on the slow side, because I was 48 years of age, supposedly happily married, and no thoughts whatsoever about not remaining that way.
And I had made a date with this boy when I really liked this girl, Tami. That was my first girlfriend, but I didn't know it yet because I was only 12. But I had made a date with this boy, and it was really bothering me that I'd have to go with him. And I was trying to figure out how to get sick, or, how not to have to go. So I told my mom that she would have to make an explanation for him why I didn't want to go. And that was when she first started to think that I wanted to be lesbian too. But then the time that I did, I brought Tami home. I went to work, and then my sister would pick me up after work. I worked at a sandwich shop, yeah. And then Tami was there, and her mom said she could sleep over. So she came over to the house, and we spent the whole weekend in my room. We didn't leave my room. And my mom, it was Sunday morning, and my mom was going to work, and she left a tray with 2 plates with eggs and pork chops and hash browns. It was so good. Anyway, it was right outside my door, and we opened the door and pulled it inside. And on top of this tray was a note saying that she understood, why we needed our own space and time to be by ourselves, and that she was happy for me if we chose to be lovers, that's okay with her. And I was so surprised that she knew. I was just like, how did she know? Did you tell her? But it was really validating for me. My mom is lesbian. She came out to me when I was 12. But I knew, she never had boyfriends. And I had lots of really nice aunties. We went camping, and my mom was sitting by the waterfall with, what was her name? Auntie Jamie, I think. And they were holding hands and staring at each other. I thought this was really odd, So I went over there and splashed them. They're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "What are you doing?" So my mom told me to go over there and sit by them, and then she would talk to me. And she said that she's lesbian. That means that she loves them. She loved my auntie. And they're a couple like any other couple. Like my grandma and my grandpa. That's how my mom and my auntie were.
I think I came out to my parents when I was very young, 18. And I think when I was 18 and I came out to them, I went through a period of time with them where they did have a hard time accepting me. And I think I pursued them enough that it was I'm your daughter and I'm always going to love you, and too bad, and you're just going to have to accept me the way that I am, because I'm not going to change. And they did have a hard time accepting it in the beginning, and a lot of that had to do with, I used to be a little bit more butch when I was younger, and that was the part that they had a hard time dealing with. And I think as a couple of years went by and I sort of let myself be myself. When I first came out being gay, I just always thought there were butch and femme. And after I let myself be myself is when they started really accepting me. And ever since then till now, I talk to my mom 3 times a day on the phone. We're best friends. Huh, Harley?
4 times
My
sometimes.
dad is the best dad you could ever want in the whole world. He is.
I want her dad. That's how good he is.
He is. He's really great. And This is their little girl. They're there for me anytime I need them.
I think it's a little bit hard for parents, even when they're, they're good liberals, but they're straight. It's one thing to be supportive of other gay people, but when your daughter is a lesbian and she's living in your house after being gone for 15 years and her girlfriend is coming over and they're going to tell the whole state that they want to get married, that pushes it a little bit further. And I think that my mother had a little bit of difficulty with it, but all in all, she's been great. And she went in the gay pride parade with us, and she had this sign that said "Mother of the Bride." My mother introduced us.
I was pre-approved.
Yeah, you were. When I first moved here, I was a lonely lesbian.
Oh, don't say that.
And my mother pointed to Genora and said, "That's Genora. I've heard she's a lesbian. I'd be very happy if she was your friend."
My father won't talk to me until I get myself straight. My mother has visited twice. It's been hard. But she has come back twice. And my kids have gone through adjustments, but they really, really do support my happiness. And they like Joni, and they like how I am now. And so it's great. It is. I like it. And I like how my kids treat Joni, and I like how they respect me and my decisions for myself. They wanted me to respect them for their decisions. They told me that when they were like 18. And so when I came out to them, I sat them down and I said, "Well, remember when you said that you wanted me to respect you for the decisions that you're making in your life now that you're young adults? Well, I have something I want to share with you. And I wanted you to respect me for my decisions." And I told them that I was gay. And this is the person that I was going to be living with. And they kind of couldn't say too much about that. I have a granddaughter, Malie, who just made 2 last week. And I have a granddaughter, Allison, who will be 2 in June. And I have another grandchild due around Thanksgiving.
And I was married for 17 years before this and had a couple kids, and now I've got a couple grandchildren. And oh, my grandson is almost 19 now, and he knows also, and he's cool with it. I mean, he thinks his grandma's the coolest person in the world, so that makes me feel good. And my granddaughter I feel kind of bad about, because my daughter and her husband are not real close to me, which makes me sad, and I probably won't get to know her the way I know my own grandson. But it makes up for it. I've got a wonderful extended family here. I don't see my ex-husband anymore, but Jacki's husband is a part of our extended family now.
He's okay with it. He's not real comfortable with it, and I'm not real sure he's thought a whole hell of a lot about getting comfortable with it. He's one of your typical brothers, If he had his druthers, I'd be straight. But he's accepted the fact that I'm 40 years old now and it looks hopeless. So,
for years you imagine what it'd be like, that moment when your parents find out, either you telling them or they just find out somehow. And it was really anticlimactic. I remember I visited them in San Francisco, and my mother kind of said, "Gaye, there's something we want to talk to you about." And they said, "Come into the bedroom." And he said, called my father as well, and he just laid on the bed and he was reading a magazine. And she said, she was kind of nervous, and she said, "Gaye, we've known for a while now that you didn't like boys." And I said, "Yeah, that's true." And I said, "Well, but I still might have children, Mom." I thought maybe that was her concern. And she said, "Oh no, don't." And then my father said, "Okay, now let's go to Tower Records." So it was just nothing happened. But I think, in spite of the fact that the event itself was uneventful, that it changed my ability to be open drastically. I think I've heard it said before, where your parents finding out about it is the last battle, and everything else is easy. And I think that's really true.
When my mom found out about me, her reaction was violent opposition. I shouldn't say violent, but she was horrified, shall we say. And we went through
a couple of months period where she could not deal with it at all, and it was a period of denial and rejection. And it was a very painful ordeal for both of us. It was 2 very intense months of crying, and she offered me a trip to Japan so that I could go and be a nun there, something like that. I don't know. And she I wouldn't say she came around to it, but she, I think, in a way, it was kind of a good thing that her reaction was so bad, because there was no way that our relationship could remain that way. And so she was forced to deal with it, and she did.
My mother, when I told her about my relationship, well, how did she do this to you? And then when I told her, she didn't do anything to me, we met, we fell in love, I have always been a lesbian. Then I had to feel the guilt. She felt like it was her fault. What did we do? So forth and so on. You didn't do anything. It wasn't your fault. This is just the way it is. I'm sorry that it's not what you wanted, but this is who I am.
The pain of coming out to your family and friends is so great. When I came out to my family, my father disinherited me. My mother for a while wouldn't touch me. I got into the hospital with my lungs, had collapsed. My sister said it's God's punishment. For 5 years we didn't speak.
My other sister is marvelous about it. She just goes on, well, that's who you are, that's who you are. And she's been to visit, and she thinks Margaret's the greatest thing. And then there's my other sister, who just has, prior to this, had been my closest friend. And we were a 1.5 year difference in age. And it bothers me a great deal that she can't get over the fact that I love women. And she's pretty much cut me off at the knees. And it's really too bad that all of us, for both of us, I feel sorry for her, and I feel sorry for myself.
I consciously waited until my sons were old enough that if they would choose not to be with me, they could survive. And I think they were about like 17 and 15 at the time. And if I had it to do all over again, I don't know. I've thought about that a lot. I think I probably, I think they would be much more comfortable with who I am had I come out when they were much younger, than all of a sudden to say, well, no, I'm your mom, but I'm really also this other different person. It's kind of like, I think people don't like to be deceived, and I think that people whom you lie to over a long period of time, especially when you're very close to them in an intimate relationship, I think they feel deceived.
I have a son who is 16 now, and I was a lesbian at the time that he was born, so I've always been out to him. I've always talked about it as he's been growing up. He grew up very much in a gay and lesbian community. The people that are part of our extended family here, many of them are lesbians or gay men. That's been problematical for him in the teenage years of homophobia, and I think he deals with it very well. My son and I had a very interesting conversation recently about the effects on him of me being a lesbian and him being raised with a lesbian mom, by a lesbian mom. And the first thing he said was that he felt it made him more open to differences in other people. And I think that's very true, that it has, and I think that's a real positive, and so does he.
My mom used to live with me, and then Ale moved in.
Did you like it?
Yes.
I didn't think that much about this child as a separate human being. You don't really think of it like that until you're in it. You know, I mean, I thought Jessica was great. She's great. We're gonna have so much fun, and you know what you normally think. And then when you're in it, it was really scary. And I had to I also had to form this relationship, a new relationship with Jane, but I had to have a relationship with this child too and make it work.
She's in kindergarten right now, and I've spoken to her teacher when the class first started about how many kids come from single-parent families, and she said 50% of her class is from a single-parent family, which means to Jessica is that who knows who else is involved in that single parent, with that single parent, a second daddy, another mommy, you know, who knows?
What have we explained?
Yeah.
That we're not like everybody else, and we're a little different, and it's okay to be different. Different doesn't mean wrong or bad, and doesn't mean that she's necessarily different.
I'm going through a baby phase right now because I'm just turned 27 and I'm just starting to go back to school, and I don't have any money, and I know I can't have a baby for another 7 years, and then I'll be 34, and then I don't want to have a teenager when I'm 50 years old, and I'm getting really depressed about it, so I've given up the idea.
And then when I came here, I started looking at all these beautiful brown babies, and once again thought, oh yeah, it's time for me to mother up here. But then I would spend time around kids who were 12 and 8 and think, oh God. But then I'd look at these little babies, and once again I thought I really want to have a little beautiful little brown babies to do that whole thing of perpetuating myself, right? But I couldn't be guaranteed I'd have a girl, and there's no way I want to have a boy. And now I don't have to think about it. I tell myself, I'm 45, I'm too old, I don't have to do it. So if Cheryl wants to.
If we ever did decide to have children, first of all, it would be through adoption. There's too many babies in this world that need homes. I'd like to, you know, physiologically, I would love to know what it's like to have a baby, but I'm too vain. I'm afraid of my hips spreading. Be honest, yeah. I'll be honest.
I've always wanted for us to put like a 5-year ban on breeding. So maybe then we could get the world's population under some kind of control. You know, I mean, there would be a 5-year gap where there were no children at that age. It'd be weird, right? You know, we do not need to procreate. We do not need to breed the way we are breeding, right? And now it's coming back. Oh, have more babies, even among lesbians. I get why are people going ahead and having so many babies?
You know, we've done a lot of research on sperm banks and places that would like collect from her brother if I was going to carry the baby, and then other places that would spin it so you can sex select, and then other places that will ship it to your home so you don't have to go to the doctor every time. But it's more, I think, you've been really positive that you want a baby for a long time, but I'm not so sure that I'm ready for one yet.
So yeah, so it's not like you do it or I'm ending this relationship. It has nothing to do with our relationship. It's just like, I think it would be just a luxury thing to be able to just say, oh, okay, where did that come from?
Well, I was just with my niece, and I don't know if it's a luxury thing. Exactly.
People I work with, you know, say to me, why is she having the kid? You know, isn't life hard enough being gay, and you're bringing a kid into this world, and you know, life is hard. Life is really hard, but I want a child. I mean, that's something in my life that I want. I can go and I can have a kid by myself. But I feel me and her are in a relationship, and not because I'm butch and she's femme, that I won't have the kid, because I'd be more than happy to have the kid.
I have one son that's 8 years old, and recently Meddy and I went to Boston in December around Christmas time, and I was artificially inseminated, and we've been planning it for a while, so I decided to be artificially inseminated, both of us decided, and hopefully we're going to have a baby girl. I'm 23 weeks pregnant now. Medi, what do you have to say?
We selected Hispanic, brown eyes, brown hair, light skin, athletically built, intelligent.
So my mother's really, she's really happy. She's gone, to most of my doctor's appointments with me, my ultrasound, everything. So she's really happy about it. And she can't wait either. It's like, wow, she's telling all of her friends, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a grandmother again, da, 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 And I'm just really happy about it too. He's bugged me for at least, out of his 8 years, at least 5 of those years he's bugged me for a brother or sister. So now every day, first thing he gets up in the morning, he gets a stethoscope, and he can't hear the baby's heartbeat yet, but he likes to listen to all the other sounds and just see if he can see the baby move.
We wanted us to be certified together because we're a couple and because their regulations say that you don't have to be married. So they did certify us together, and I think our file is probably the thickest one they have. But we've been foster parents for 2 years now, and Family Court is very supportive of us. In fact, they'd like us to recruit other lesbian parents because we've been very successful, and that other couples don't have as high of a success rate as we've had in working with youth.
We should have, help out the gay and lesbian teens because it's so rough for them, because gang related too, and no one really to talk to, because I was that way when I was, teenager. No one to turn to and I could relate to. And I felt that I could help, I could be a role model. I could listen to them and help them out and be positive towards their needs. Work for a trucking company, drive an 18-wheeler dump truck. So work with all men, a couple women, but they all know that I'm a lesbian, and I always talk about my girlfriend and my family. And if they have something negative to say about it, I'm very defensive about it. And even at the union, I'm in the union also, so they tend to put men above women, and I try to put a stop to that right there and then, because when it comes for jobs, the next in line is the next in line, not because they have a family and I'm a woman and I'm supposed to be single, No, I explain them that I have a girlfriend, I have a daughter, I have a house, and I have cars, and I have bills, just like every other family, and I don't want to be treated second best. So it's a fight. I've been fighting with them for a while.
I used to go with her to her job to wash her rig because it takes like all day to wash one of those. And then it's just the same as if it were anybody else, that her coworkers whistle or they say something, and then she'll just tell them, it's my girlfriend, leave her alone, you know?
Like if they go, who your girlfriend? And I go, hey, no talk about my girlfriend like that. You let me talk about your wife like that, That's not nice. You better watch it.
I'm a woman that's been in a man's world for a long, long time, and I don't think anyone in the world would ever describe me as passive. And I knew that I couldn't be if I was going to get where I wanted to go when I was real young. I mean, I can remember my parents' friends patting me on the head, the usual question, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I'd say, I'm going to be a doctor. Oh, how wonderful, you want to be a nurse? And I'd say, no, damn it, I'm going to be a doctor. Which is what I did, and became an emergency medicine specialist. It's an interesting field in the sense that I think emergency medicine specialists are sort of a weird bunch of individualists, and I fit that reasonably well. And I could, and I was at a point in my life where I could be as out as I wanted to be, felt very comfortable, and if people had a problem with it, I could clearly say, I'm sorry, but that's your problem.
Am I out at work? I'm out at work. I've been out at work, from what I've learned in the past year and a half or so, I've been out at work for a lot longer than I realized. I never walked down the halls at work and, made the announcement that I was a lesbian.
The ones that know it, know it, and the ones that don't.
I'm not worried about the work, whatever they want.
But you have come out to some of them, haven't you?
Some of them no.
They just, well, I go to her Christmas parties and her summer picnics with her as her spouse, so I'm sure that they figure it out before too long.
I'm a disc jockey for a local radio station. I can't say what the call letters are. I think that's a real clear example of being a lesbian working at a radio station in a straight world.
Well, I think that, you know, being an artist and being in an art department in an academic setting, they're pretty liberal, or at least they want to appear that way. When I start to talk about my work, then I address what the intent was. And so the one body of work that deals specifically with lesbian relationships, I talk to them about it, and then it gives me an opportunity to come out. And I think it's important for me to come out, because one of the things I wanted to do as an educator is to make it easier for people, young people, like the position that I was in, hoping that if I had a role model at that age, I think it would have been a lot less tormenting for me.
Well, I'm 35 years old, and the type of work that I do is community work. I work with different organizations for bicycle paths, which I consider to be wheelchair paths. And am I out of work? Volunteer work? You're never out of volunteer work.
Out as a lesbian.
Out as a lesbian. You know, I wonder if I am out as a lesbian. I think so. I think if anybody's awake, they would see that I'm out as a lesbian. I get lots of women that want to pick up on me. They must know I'm a lesbian. I've built and designed this wheelchair for accessibility into swimming pools. I have installed a quick release lever for this handlebar. By doing that, it allows me the mobility to move the handlebar out of the way. Then locking it back down for security reasons. Then I'm able to walk from my waist up, down, into the pool.
Well, she's going through the EMT program right now, and
she's gonna be a paramedic.
Right. Or something like that. And taking some other classes, so she's so busy now and I work 5 nights a week that I'm always asking her to pencil me in somewhere.
What do you want to be when you grow up, Jessica?
A chefess.
A what?
You remember?
A what?
A chef.
A chefess?
Yes.
What's that? What do they do?
You remember?
What do they do?
You remember when you gave me
A sheriff.
Oh, a sheriff.
A sheriff. Oh, okay. She just got a new sheriff's badge and some spurs. That was about 2 hours ago. Yesterday she wanted to be a teacher.
And a ballerina.
And a nurse.
And a nurse, yes.
I didn't say I wanted to be a nurse.
I teach school. I'm a Montessori preschool teacher. But right now I'm working for the Department of Education for the state, starting infant toddler care for teen parents. My last job, I was at Catholic University, and I was a teacher in their lab school. And I came out to my supervisor there. The parents, quite a few of the parents knew I was lesbian, but because Sam used to come there and help fix the classroom. But when I told my supervisor, she was like, well, does that, do you have to talk about that, or does that matter here? And I said, well, that's why I'm telling you, because I feel it shouldn't be an issue. It's not, does it make me less of a teacher or more of a teacher? So they had a really hard time, and they sort of squeezed me out in other ways. But just a few months after that, I was politely terminated.
You have to remember that Hawaii has had a pretty
liberal political climate for gays and lesbians. And some of the cultures that live here, not gay people were allowed to survive, where in some cultures they were killed. So that helps a little bit. And really and truly, what that will do, as long as the legislation lives, is mean that you can't get fired because of your sexual preference. But both of us know, we all know that yes, you can get fired for your sexual preference. They won't call it that, they'll do it some other way. You try and be a teacher and be an out lesbian or a gay man, and you lose your job in 5 minutes. So the legislation is important, but really, the way life is, it's not going to protect anybody.
When I came to Hawaii in the military, at Fort Shafter, several of my friends were under investigation. And when I first came in, I was military police. When I first got to Fort Shafter, they considered me going undercover to investigate these women. Little did they know that I was friends with them. And when they asked me, I told them I would be uncomfortable doing that and led them to believe for other reasons, but then they didn't pursue the facts, so I never had to do it. And then eventually several of those friends did get put out of the military for being gay. And they were top-notch soldiers. They were like Soldier of the Month, Soldier of the Year people, and because they were gay, they were put out of the military.
That I know of, there are probably about 20 lesbian lawyers, you know, in this state. Oahu and all the other islands. Women have an uphill battle, you know, not only because gay women, just by mere fact of being women. Gay men are still men, and they're in that class where, when I read Honolulu Magazine or something, when they did the gay thing, it was like most of the people in there were successful gay men. You don't see too many successful gay women who own businesses, and you know, and that's because they're women, not because they're gay, probably.
I think Hawaii is still a very conservative place, for the most part. Definitely tainted by, maybe tainted is not the word I want, but definitely, you know, flavored by the Christianity that came to save these islands.
And she had this nice little studio in Manoa, and she showed this place to me, and then she said, you should go home and think about this. And I said, well, I really like it. I don't know what to think about. She said, well, I'd really like to have to ask a lot of questions for anybody I run into. And I began to think, what? And I said, what is it? She said, well, whoever is here would have to be straight. I have two very macho sons, and I could not have somebody who was gay here. And I said, I am gay, you know, and if I were in California, I would be right now going down to file a complaint against you, and unfortunately in this state I can't. You know, she just flat out told me. I didn't go in there with I'm a dyke button, you know.
I think it's definitely harder to be out in Hawaii than out in the mainland because, you know, safety in numbers. I mean, there's just more of them out there. There's more things to do. I think there's more organizations. There's more everything. So we're sort of an oddity still here. We have our little patch of Waikiki, and everyone knows it, and they can throw rocks when they want, you know, when they're driving by, and they just know where we are. We're very centralized.
It didn't seem that we ever had to be physically affectionate with one another. People always knew we were together. And I was standing in front of Carla. She was sitting in the seat, and the girls behind us began making comments. Dyke, I like pussy, lesy bitches, things like that. Very young. They couldn't have been more than 13, 14 years old. And I was remembering, I didn't want to say anything because I remembered myself doing that when I was fighting with myself.
I spoke at 4 or 5 classes the whole day I spent there, and then all these kids had to have permissions from their parents, a written permission that they could do this because they were going to be talking about this subject. And when I talked to these kids, it's not like, hey, I'm this gay person, but, you know, I talked to them as if I were their friend. And then, you know, I would ask them, well, how many of you know of anybody who is gay? And a lot of them raise their hands, and they say, well, my auntie, she hangs out with her girlfriend and this and that. One girl, she says, well, why can't you guys just be best friends? And I said, that's a good question, but let's talk about this, you know.
Here's a 90s twist to the belief that love will conquer all. 3 homosexual couples have gone to court challenging Hawaii's Attorney General over his policy that keeps a marriage certificate out of their reach.
It's really pretty basic. To me, it seems like it should be an easy issue for most people to understand. We're in love, we want to get married. I've known I was gay for a long time, so I didn't think I could get married, but I really wanted a relationship that was going to last and was going to be steady. I wanted a family unit. I wanted to live with someone who I wanted to be with the rest of my life. There's 200 laws in this state that we don't have equal access to if we can't get married. And they're not even contracts that we can make. Like, there's no way I can go to a lawyer and say, I'd like to make a contract that says if I ever do something wrong, Genora does not have to testify against me in a court of law. You can't make that kind of contract unless you're married. And I hope that we win. I hope that the judges say, you can get married. If that doesn't happen, then we go to the legislature.
Right. And it doesn't stop until
we win.
Until we win.
You know, who is the rest of the world to tell me that my relationship is not just as meaningful, just as sacred, and yet doesn't have the legal and business and other implications of theirs?
That's a hard one for me. I'll tell you why. Because marriage to me is based on something that's very patriarchal. It's something that's been created out of the patriarchy that we're raised in. And it's not something that we as women, I feel that's something that we've created. It's hard for me to identify with marriage in that sense, you know. When I think of marriage, many times I think of property ownership, and that makes me feel uncomfortable.
We feel real committed to each other. We don't even feel the need to have even the type of ceremonies a lot of women we know have. But I've also had friends go through ceremonies and gotten married, and a week or a month later, hey, they're gone. And it's all what you make of your own relationship.
We had a whole marriage ceremony and a reception, a whole wedding in New York about a month before we moved here. And we had the wedding at my parents' house in their apartment. They've been very supportive in that way, very, very. And I was like really moved at the wedding because I really felt like, first of all, they did a lot of work in helping us like really get this together, and it was in their home and a lot of their friends and family, and they treated it absolutely like, you know, any other wedding, and it was really special. You know, I mean, really, I thought it was unbelievable.
It was interesting to live in a community with a lot of lesbians, and to get it that many of the women wouldn't consider me seriously as a partner because of my age.
In spite of the intimacy that I have with some friends, there are still barriers because we're not sexually intimate, and yet I'm choosing to keep those barriers up right now because I want to look at myself. I want to become more intimate with myself before I get involved with someone else again. And hopefully I will get involved with someone else, and it'll be a healthier relationship.
Being a lesbian is much more than sexuality. You know, I mean, I haven't had any sex with anybody for almost 5 years. You know, but I am still a lesbian, just not an active one, not a practicing one. It has much more to do with a certain lifestyle, political and emotional.
The fundraiser that the lesbians held for me here on the island years ago, when my disease, multiple sclerosis, was diagnosed, I then became wheelchair accessible or bound, whatever. And that was really helpful, really, really helpful. Everybody really pulled together, brought out everything they'd had at their house that was worth any value of money, and auctioned it off. And then I received that money so I could help support myself. That was a real community, a real lesbian community thing.
We started Island Lifestyle 4 years ago to provide a place for the community to find events and things that are going on in the community. And we reach about 30,000 gays and lesbians in Hawaii, in the Hawaiian Islands, the neighbor islands as well as Oahu, plus the mainland.
So one of the sections of the magazine that we've had since the very beginning is the community calendar. And we have that. We have a list all the events that we can get in every week and during the month, like the lesbian support group, which has been meeting every Wednesday night for 17 years or something. And we also list neighbor island stuff, so there's a lesbian support group on Maui. There's a women's potluck on Kauai every month. Also, Blazing Saddles Country Dancing Group, which also meets weekly and has a very large following, about 80 to 100 people come out and dance together every week. It's a good fun. The religious services for the community, which include Dignity, which is a Catholic group, and 2 MCCs on this island, as well as the neighbor islands, also have churches that serve the community. We also have a sports calendar in the magazine in the sports section. There's the softball games on Sunday that happen every Sunday through about half of the year. There's also Front Runners, which is a running club for gays and lesbians. Tennis meets on Saturdays, and they have group play and team tennis now, individual and team tennis. There's also bowling, and there's a Paradise bodybuilding group, but they're just forming. So there's more groups forming all the time. So if you have an interest in sports, there's something out there that you can get involved in and people to work out with and have fun with.
In addition to the ongoing events listed in the calendar, we also list special events. The Gay and Lesbian Community Center has a number of events. In fact, they now have their own page that lists what's going on there. Their big event of the year is the art auction and banquet that they hold in March, and it's their big fundraiser. June is Gay and Lesbian Pride Month, in which a number of events go on for the community. It's a very busy month. Some of the highlights are the film festival.
How do you spell relief? I spell it Gayschol. Thank heavens you're listening. I've got something to tell you. I have a preference. She's special, and I'm worth it.
Gay and Lesbian Pride Week culminates with probably the most visible event of the year for the community, and that's the Pride Parade. It goes right through the heart of Waikiki, along the ocean side where all the tourists are watching, and brings a lot of people out.
2, 4, 6, 8. Are you sure your wife is straight? 3, 5, 7, 9. Lesbians are mighty fine. 2, 4, 6, 8. Are you sure your wife is straight? 3, 5, 7, 9. Lesbians are mighty fine.
At that young age, I was already very aware of the differences between the haves and the have-nots, and girls had not. So I wanted it all. Hey, so I thought, I'll be a boy, I'll be one of the haves.
Or there are times that I might say that I'm gay. And then they usually say, you mean happy? And I say, yes, all the time.
I think straight people need to get out from between our legs. I mean, they're obsessed with the fact of what we do sexually, and get so plugged into that they don't see the total picture of who we are.
Basically, I think heterosexuals need to know that
they have a choice.
that they can become one of us.